Okay, by the end of this lesson, we are going to send actual DMX out to this fixture. Chances of me having to re-record this are quite high, actually, if I'm honest, but let's just see where we get to, right? So we've got our graph here in the user interface where we've created a value from our slider. What we need to do now is send this to a DMX node. Now, we haven't actually connected this DMX node up yet and checked it's working. We can't do that until we've got something to test, so we need to build this UI and then we'll find out if I've set this up correctly. So first thing we need to do is to create a DMX output node. Now, if we just think we know what we want, I think I want to send some DMX, we can just try searching for it and see if the node's been named the way we think it should be named. So if I type in send DMX, there's a few things there. Is send DMX enabled? Well, has somebody actually activated the patch? Send DMX to output port, or set send DMX enabled, which means clicking it on and off to actually output DMX. We can actually attach these all to buttons, so you could have a button that turns it on, turns it off. It's all quite useful. Send DMX to output port, so the one we need right now. Okay. Now, when I add this, it's looking for things that we haven't set up yet, so we need to do all of this. And I should stress as well, this isn't using the DMX subsystem, which is the bit that makes Unreal really clever at working with DMX. This is just very dumb, sending DMX directly out the network port based on the value. It's not very clever, it's really quite raw, but it's a good way of testing if things are working. And considering this is a tutorial building up how we use DMX in Unreal, this is a really good place to start. So we're going to connect this up to the variable. Now, rather than, I'll connect up to this variable here. Doesn't need to be a variable, but the data we need is going to come out when we change the slider value, okay, as opposed to a button click. Now, we could move the slider and hit a button and that would load the thing and we'll send it one at a time, but we're going to do it every time you move the slider. It's going to change the value because this is going to drive the intensity control of the light, so we want it to be smooth. Output port reference, it has no outputs because we haven't set them up yet, so we need to do that next. So the output port is basically what is coming out the network. Is it streaming ACN? Is it ArtNet? What's the IP address of it? So to do that, we need to go back to our project settings. Now, I showed you this earlier, very, very briefly. If we scroll down, we have got all of our plugins that have been loaded. They have special settings that we can change. So if you ever load a plugin, this is generally where you come to find information out about it. We can ignore the fixture settings, so we're not going to use those at all for this project. That's if you want to build your own custom fixtures. That goes well beyond normal lights, things that, if you need pan and tilt, they already exist. It's if you need to create something really bizarre, which we do at Copper Candle all the time, but you only need to do it for this. Receive DMX by default and send DMX by default. We don't need to receive DMX because we're not doing a visualizer, we're not getting data in, so we're actually going to untick that just to keep this simple. DMX send rate is always 44. Input ports and output ports. Well, we've just turned off receive DMX, so we don't need an input port. If you were trying to receive data from an actual lighting desk, then this is what you'd need. But we're doing output ports. So we're going to click on the plus sign to add an element. So here we go, added index 0. And this is the port name. So we're going to name this ArtNet, just because that's what we're going to be sending. The protocol name, this is going to be looking into the DMX plugin and working out what protocols we have available to us. And here we have ArtNet and streaming ACN. If you've loaded the Copper Candle plugin for Copper Stream, it would also appear here. And you'd want to, because it's brilliant. It's a low latency streaming protocol for DMX. You can't send ArtNet or streaming ACN reliably over a Wi-Fi connection or up to the cloud, not without a VPN solution that actually doesn't send ArtNet in anyway. You still can't send it. Copper Stream can be sent anywhere over an internet connection or Wi-Fi because it's incredibly low latency. So we often use it on our projects and it would appear here as Copper Stream, so we can broadcast Unreal data into and out of, say, a VR device or tablet. Communication type, broadcast. We could do unicast if you know exactly where you want to send it to, but we're trying to keep this simple. We want as few errors as possible, so it's set to broadcast. And there's that IP address that I mentioned it's looking for. It's got 3 IP addresses. Now, earlier on when we were testing, when I set it to the 0 for the first network interface address, it came up with the 000. This is what it was finding. 127 for the second, and if we'd done a third, it would have been the actual IP address of this PC, which is on my full network. If I put it on any of these, it should work, but 0.0.0.0 is the best place to start because it's going to broadcast across the entire network and you're not going to miss anything. If you want to work a computer in a theatre somewhere, maybe just check what you're doing here, make sure you're not broadcasting to somebody's server or onto a stage or something. But that's the default. What that will do is it'll always take the first network card it finds on the computer. So it's a useful one to place to start. So we've done that. There's nothing else to change here, I believe. So I'm going to close it. I'm going to do a file save all. I need to be in DMX console to do that. File save all. And now I should see my ArtNet port that I just created. And I could have named it anything, but I named it ArtNet. So I click that, and now it's going to send something to the output port. If I clicked out of this node here, I could actually set a control mechanism that could switch the output port that I'm talking to, and I could then connect that to the user interface. So there's lots of ways you can start to break this down, but we're just going to send it out on ArtNet on the local universe 1. Actually, I'll just go back into, where is it? No, it's not in there. It's not in there. I'll have to come back to it later. There is a way of changing which universe you're sending on. Here it is. It is here, yes. So I mentioned earlier that I plugged in my XLR into output 2 of this node. And that's because output 1 is set to 0 and output 2 is set to universe 1. Unreal, maybe it's because they're game developers that made it, but they really struggled with the concept of 0 being 1. It's just something that ArtNet does. It's 0 to 244, and that's the 255 bits of address. Streaming ACN starts at universe 1, ArtNet starts at universe 0. So the local universe is what we're working on in Unreal, but to help us lighting people out, they've actually allowed us to set this to external universe 0, which would then send it out of my output 1. But to keep everything linear, I'm calling it 1. Oh, sorry, I've done it again. I've got to stop pressing that button. I need to use this numpad instead. There we go. So I'm going to call it universe 1 so that we're always talking about 1. So 1 is logically just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, but this is actually outputting on universe 1 from output 2. So you need to worry about that. But that should then be sending data to my light. Okay. Amount of universes is set to 10. I'm actually going to change this to 1. You can set it to 200 if you wanted to. We're not outputting anything, so it's not going to make a big difference. But let's just keep it neat, just sending 1 universe. If we accidentally put something on universe 500, it's not going to try and send loads and loads of data. So let's close that, save it again. Oh, file save all is up there. Okay, so now we've got our ArtNet. It's on local universe 1, that's what we're sending. So when this value comes in, we want to send on universe 1 a value on the channel. Now the channel map is based on 0 to 512 or 1 to 512, which is how many DMX addresses we have in the universe, how many channels in the universe. Now if I've got my fixture set to universe 1, address 1, then I think it's either address 1 or address 2. It controls the intensity of that light, so we'll find out in a second. So I need to tell it to operate channel 1. Now if I drag this value across to load it into this, it can't do it, and the reason for that is because this channel map is made up of 512 blocks. It doesn't know which one I'm trying to connect it to. So I need to make a map. I need to break it apart so I can see the individual bits. And this is really messy. We will later on learn how to do this without having to make lots of tools to break things apart. But for now, this is how we're going to demonstrate things to work. If I click backwards, so I left click on it and pull it back, the context menu will break it down to say, this is all you can do right now, okay? You've got utilities. And in here we've got arrays, maps and operators. They all do different things that you might want to add. There's our get that we had earlier. But we want in map a make map, okay? Make map will take a value there and add it to key 0. So 0 is the very first channel being output on universe 1. So that's address 1, universe 1. If I add a pin, it will create another lot. So that will be, at the moment it's still set to the same thing. We're going to change that to key 1 values. Oh, I've done it again. Key 1 value or 0 in fact. So that's the first two addresses both set to 0. Now I want my slider to set this first address to be anything from 0 to 255 depending on the slider. So I'm going to drag this node over to my value. Oh, and it won't let me do it because this needs to be a byte. Right, but I could add it to the key, which will allow me to change which address I'm using. So I am going to refer to my my backup project to remind myself how I did this. Oh, it is set to value, so we need to create an array index. Right. Okay, that doesn't make sense, but let's see. Okay, well, let's just see what happens, right? So what I'll do is I'll add a print string into this as well, because that will help us see what's actually happening. I will connect this up to this key and then set to value 0 and see if that creates a DMX output on value 0. I have a feeling it's not going to, but this is what I told you at the beginning, is we're going to have a bit of fun and games discovering things together. So I'm going to connect that also up to that print string. So it's going to disconnect that. We don't need that int anymore. So this is all got a bit messy. Let's spread it out so you can see what I'm doing. All right. So this is sending the float information from the slider into a tool which will turn it into an integer. An integer is kind of the same as a float, but it converts it to be without decimal places. It's always to 1 or to 0 decimal places. So it will be a solid number, 1, 2, 3, not 1.1.3 or 1.654, whatever. It's always a solid number. So that is sending up here to the print string, converting it into a string, is also then sending it to this key 0. I have no idea what that's going to do at the moment. So we're going to compile and save and see if it works. So when I hit play, if I drag this slider out, if I click test, it should print a number, 62. So it's printing for me an integer based on where the slider is. Okay, that sounds good. What about what's happening with the DMX? Well, if we want to see what's happening with the DMX, we can load up a channel monitor. So up here, we've got a window here for DMX. You probably all spotted it and wondered why I wasn't talking about it. Well, this is it. All right, send DMX is ticked. That's because we ticked it in the property settings, and everything else we're going to come to later. But channel monitor is what we want. Let's drag it over. So we want to go to our outputs, and we want to monitor all ports, but we want to be on universe 0 or universe 1. We want to be on universe 1. And look, nothing is sending at the moment. So that shows us something's not working. Let's go in and try this manually. Let's check this is actually sending. So I'm going to disconnect the slider. We're going to change this to be value 127, and I'm going to set this one to 1. Oh, I've done it again, haven't I? Yep. Stop using that keyboard. 127. I need to get myself a Stream Deck. If anyone wants to sponsor me a Steam Deck, that'd be great. And I'm going to set this one to 254. Okay, so that's hopefully going to set the first channel to 127 and the second channel to 254. So let's go back in, let's play and see what happens. Let's check universe 0 because sometimes it appears in the wrong unit. Okay, I figured out what is wrong with my setup here. It is to do with this DMX external universe start. It should be 0, not 1. When it's set to 1, as we had it, it's actually sending out on ArtNet universe 2. And if I set it to 0, it's now sending on ArtNet universe 1 in real life. So when I go back into my settings, if I hit play, check that you can still see me. I'm not pressing the buttons, no good. I'll drag across my, so this is where we need more screen space. I've lost them all now. Let's get it back. If I clear the DMX buffers, it's frustrating. And now I move the UI, you'll see it's generating a DMX output on that channel. That's not what we want it to be doing at the moment, but it's a start. We've now got DMX coming out of the desk. What we need to do now is to work out how to get the data to represent what's actually on the slider. So we've not been able to connect this into the value here. Right? It's automatically setting universe 1 to 254. We want that in there. Oh, it's letting me do it now. So that's setting the value. Perfect, perfect, it's working, great. So key 0 and value 0 is not actually doing anything in this case, because when we were loading key 1, it was outputting on address 1 on the channel monitor. Let me show you. I'll compile that, save, go back to DMX console, hit play. Oh, we need our DMX channel monitor, which I'm going to drag down here. Now if I move this, there we go. So that's coming out on 1. So 0 doesn't do anything in here. We need it to be on key 1 because that is this address 1. And then as I drag this slider up and down, it is sending 254 bytes of information, it's DMX data, out on universe 1. So there you go, it's working. So the thing to do, I suppose, is to check if it's working. I have to turn this off because it's so noisy. Let's wait for it to start up. And what we should see happen is whatever is assigned to address 1 on this fixture, it will control it. Now, I don't know if that is if that's going to be intensity or shutter, but let's see. If I load up 1, it's doing something, that's for sure. I think what it's doing is it's loading up the macros. There's loads of macro settings. So it's automatically loading the macros. Now if I change this to key 2 to see if that moves the second address, let's see what it does. We're going to clear the DMX buffers. And now let's drag this, it's now moving number 2. And there we go, we've got intensity. It's a nice tungsten lamp in there, so I'm getting a bit of preheat and delay. I'm now controlling that light with a DMX slider in Unreal. I've got to tell you, the first time I did this, it did feel pretty cool. Because that's like a boyhood dream for me, to be able to create my own lighting desk. Just to see where else we can go with this, let's try changing this to key 4, which I think might be tilt or pan. And we're going to compile and save. Back to DMX console, let's load it up. And what's it going to do? No, it sounds like I can hear gobos moving, so that must be the gobo changer. What you actually need is the attributes of the fixture to tell you. You can get the manual for it. I'm going to cheat, I'm just going to load up my Scratch project that has all of this saved in it. So I can tell you that pan and tilt is 7 and 8. I've disconnected it from this one. Pan is 6 and 7, so let's try that. So I'm going to change this to key 6, and now when I compile and save, hopefully we should see the mirror move. Don't know if you can see it where you are. Can you still see me? Yes, you can. I'm going to go for a big camera now, okay, so you can see the light and you know what I'm going to be doing. I'll move a slider on the user interface. There we go. Look at that. I've got a mirror tilting and I'm doing that with my UI. So essentially what we could do now is just take 5 sliders and have them drive all of the attributes of that fixture, and we've then got a basic lighting desk, right? It can move all the different objects. So what we're going to do in the next few lessons is start to construct some of those other elements to get effectively a fixture control mechanism working. And once we've seen that, we can then build it into a patched version of the fixture, which is much more sensible because then we can replicate it across more fixtures. We can use the patch controls, which is much more sensible than trying to build all these things one at a time. So you can see the problem I'm having trying to find the actual fixture, trying to find the attributes that control the right values for the right attributes. So we're going to get rid of all of that, start working with fixtures in a minute. Okay, see you soon.